Imagine going from being a successful momfluencer with a YouTube channel with over 2 million subscribers to being the subject of a 2020 expose as a felon. We're going to talk about that today. Before we begin, I want to let you guys know that today's episode will be a lot more serious than I ever intended when I decided to start this channel. Today's episode deals with maltreatment of children and also involves some religious manipulation. So I really don't want to get super jokey on a subject like that. So I hope you guys can bear with me. I promise things will get much more lighthearted in future episodes. But as of today, wanted to let you guys know that. And I also wanted to give you guys an opportunity to move on if this is not going to be something that you can deal with. I will not be getting graphic at all, but I do understand that this is a very sensitive topic for people, and I want to give you the opportunity to scroll on and protect your mental health. Okay? All right. If you haven't already figured out, today we're going to talk about Ruby Franke, Jodi Hildebrandt, and the whole debacle that surrounds those two. If those names are not familiar to you, don't worry. I'm going to break it down. I have some notes, so if you see me look down, I'm looking at my notes. That being said, let me give you a little bit of a background on Ruby Franke. Okay? Ruby Franke had a blog, a video blog here on YouTube called 8 Passengers. That blog began in 2015. It was her husband Kevin, and their 6 children. As you would expect from a typical like mommy blog, it was dealing with their life, their day-to-day life as parents, as a family, just the normal things that you would expect that a family would go through from day to day. Fast forward to 2020, and you start to see that the public is taking issue with some of the things that they're seeing on the channel. There's a couple incidences where, and I've seen clips of these, where Ruby's discipline may be construed as going overboard as far as strictness, right? So, for example, there's one instance where she tells one of the younger children, if you cut anything else in this house, I'm going to cut the head off this stuffed animal. Maybe when you grew up, that was how your parents talked to you. I know I'm Gen X, and honestly, that is how my grandmother talked to me. I'm not saying that that makes it not abusive, but it may make you more desensitized to that kind of talk, which could be taken as mental abuse, right? There's another instance where Ruby's talking to a teacher and she's also letting the audience know that her 6-year-old didn't take their lunch to school, and the 6-year-old was responsible for packing their own lunch. And so she told the teacher, that child's just going to have to starve today, basically, right? And again, I know that many of us grew up like that. I know there were instances where when my younger son was like middle school or so, he consistently would spend all the money in his lunch account. And I finally was like, you got to eat whatever they're giving you at school then. They had like a backup meal for them. Now, that's not starving and that's not a 6-year-old, but at the same time, that could be considered extreme to some other folks. There was another incident with Ruby where her oldest son revealed during an episode that he hadn't slept on a bed in like 7 months. Apparently, he had gotten into trouble, and as punishment, his room was taken away. He didn't have a bed, he was sleeping on a beanbag for 7 months. So you add all those things together, probably with some other nuances that people noticed during the course of the show. And that ended in a change.org petition where people were saying, hey, CPS, you need to go check these folks out. We don't think they're legit. You know, Ruby and Kevin, even though he wasn't the disciplinarian on the show, he's standing idly by while Ruby is making these decisions. So definitely red flags were made. And I speculate that this is what led to the decline of the show. According to Kevin, the last time Ruby uploaded an episode was in 2021. So within a year of that change.org petition. As I said, One of these situations involved the eldest son who did something that mom didn't appreciate. I believe he was having some other instances where he was acting out and maybe could use a little bit more discipline, according to the Frankies. At some point, they sent him to like a camp, like a wilderness camp. I have my own thoughts on some of these camps. If you know what you know, right? Anyway, he came back and still wasn't exhibiting the behavior that they had expected of him for that family. So they decided to get him counseling, which I completely recommend and am behind. Generally, that's a good thing, right? The counselor that they chose, I believe, was recommended through their church, which they are members or were members of the LDS church in, in the place where they lived. But this was Jody Hildebrandt. Jody has a past, you guys, to the extent where the eldest daughter had done some research and some Googling and found some things that were not quite, told dad, hey, I think you might want to rethink this counselor. There's some things on here and they just don't seem right. They went ahead and decided to let Jody counsel this child anyway. Now, Kevin will go on to say later in an interview that part of Jody's technique as far as working with children was to work with the parents, because the parents are in charge and you got to get to the heart of the matter. And so she deals with the parents, deeply with the parents, deeply with the moms. Jody's counseling the child. Jody's working closely with Ruby, having lots of conversations. Apparently, somehow through all of this, they start to uncover trouble with the marriage. Ruby expresses that she's having some displeasure that Kevin's not living up to his end as a spouse. This goes into, okay, Ruby and Kevin are now getting marital counseling from Jody. So she's working with the children, or at least the oldest child, and now she's working with them as a couple. Jody recommends that Kevin leaves the house. Kevin leaves the house. They get separated. He has all these conditions that he has to meet to make his marriage work. And then Jody moves in to the house. Some point down the line, we're not exactly sure when, Jody goes back to her house. Ruby moves out of her house and moves in with Jody. By now, the two eldest children have left the house. They don't live in the home. However, there's still four other kids. You'll hear testimony if you watch some of the videos that I link below. There's a couple of Hulu specials. Law and Crime has done some things as well, and then also Court TV. But you'll hear the eldest daughter, Sherry Franke, actually put in a welfare check because she'd heard reports that her youngest siblings were being left home alone. When the police went to investigate, they found that the children were in the home. No one would let them into the house. They talked to neighbors. Neighbors expressed the same concerns. But at that time, nothing was done by law enforcement. Fast forward to 2023. In 2023, everything changes with one call to law enforcement. Now, the difference is that this was prompted by something that I can't describe with any other word other than alarming. So imagine you're sitting in your house. Your doorbell rings. You look at your security camera because it's 2023 and you probably have that. And you see a little boy. Now, at first glance, probably depending on your camera quality, it doesn't look like anything abnormal. Maybe he's selling something, you think. Maybe you don't know, right? So you answer your door, and the kid says this: I was hoping you can do me two favors. You say, what? He says, can you take me to the nearest police station? Maybe just the one favor. You guys, every single time I watch that footage, my heart breaks and my eyes well up with tears. This child, you can imagine the state that the child must have been in to be to the point where they had to resort to this, right? I won't describe exactly the nature of this child's injuries, but the child had visible injuries at this point, to the point where we're the neighbor who calls this in to the police, which you can still see through the Ring camera footage. The neighbor's calling the cops. He's explaining the situation, what the child looks like. He gets choked up. He can't even complete his words. That's how devastating this boy looks. Long story short, law enforcement shows up, EMTs show up, they treat the child's injuries. You can see if you look at any of these things, the child is not in a good state. He is in a state of deterioration. He lets law enforcement know that there is another child in this home where he had been staying, which is Jody Hildebrandt's house. Remember, the counselor of his mom. Law enforcement gets a quick warrant, goes over to Jody's house, like I'm talking SWAT team action, and you just know they had to be hot by the time they got there to see this child, see what he looks like, hear what he says he's gone through to get to this state. And then there's supposed to be another child in that house. You can imagine like the sense of urgency they have. So they show up there, and I'm sure that Jody had security cameras as well, because when she finally does open the door, she's got her lawyer on the phone. The cops are like, you need to step out of the house. She's like, wait a minute, do you have a warrant? And they're like, yes, you need to step out of the house. She's like, no, my lawyer's on the phone. They're like, they pull her out of the house. She's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You guys, I'm not gonna lie, that was satisfying to me to see, because this kid has been through it and you had a hand in this. You were a part of this. If nothing else, you knew this child's physical state. So I did not have any sympathy for Jody at that moment. So they end up doing a sweep of Jody's house. She lives in this big compoundy kind of nice house, like when I say compound, I mean like as far as acreage or square footage, right? It's a big house. I believe it had 10 rooms. They do end up finding another child, a young child, I believe younger than little boy. This child is found basically in a closet, sitting on the floor, and traumatized to the point where they don't even want to speak to law enforcement. It takes law enforcement 2 hours to get this child to open up to them and allow them to take the child to go get medical treatment, because they're also in a state of deterioration, just like little boy. Obviously, this is going to end in charges for both Ruby Franke and Jody Hildebrandt. You might be asking yourself, where's Kevin Franke in this? Where's the husband? What happened here? The police take Jody Hildebrandt and Ruby Franke into custody. Ruby showed up later. She wasn't there at the house when the police first got there, but she showed up, and they took them both into custody. She wasn't saying anything. Girl was tight. And you shouldn't say anything. I mean, that's general legal advice. You don't speak until you have legal representation. So I can't really say I fault anyone for that. But she didn't say anything, right? Take them to jail for interviews. Then the authorities contact Kevin Franke. They're like, hey, will you come in? He's like, I don't know what's going on. I just got a call from my wife, estranged wife, saying, hey, come get the kids. They're interviewing him. He reveals that he hasn't talked to his wife, hasn't seen his children in over a year. You guys remember that these are terms that were set by Jody Hildebrandt as part of the therapy to repair his marriage. Get out of the house. Don't talk to Ruby. Don't talk to the kids. He has no clue of the state of decline that his kids are in. He probably doesn't even know that they had moved in with Jody. It's unclear to me with that. And you guys, if you will look at some of these clips from the interview and you look at Kevin, and then you look at some of the clips from Eight Passengers, even he has lost a lot of weight. So it makes me wonder if he had some of the terms and restrictions on him that maybe Jody and Ruby had given to the children that were in their care. I don't know. This is pure speculation from me, but you guys look at the video clips from the interview and let me know what you guys think of that. Long story short, both Ruby Franke and Jody Hildebrandt end up taking pleas for their charges, which are for the maltreatment of children. I won't say specific words because I'm not sure how YouTube takes those words, right? In any case, they take a plea. Ruby takes a plea in turn for testimony against Jody Hildebrandt. Jody Hildebrandt takes a plea, I believe, so that she can limit the duration of her sentencing. Not quite sure how it works in their state. I believe they're in Utah as to what their sentences will be. That remains to be seen. So Why am I talking to you today in 2025 about charges and convictions that happened in 2023? Well, remember when I told you that the eldest daughter, Sherry, had called a welfare check out of concern for her younger siblings? Girl has been through it, right? She always had those suspicions. She warned, she's been a whistleblower. Girl has been doing the thing. She's been an advocate for her siblings, and I commend her for that. But most recently, she has written a book called The House of My Mother. I'm I'm here for it. I downloaded it today on audiobook because my ADHD will not allow me to do the ready, flippy, flippy thing. It is 7 hours on audiobook. I think that we can get through it in 2 weeks, and I'm hoping that you guys will want to read it with me, and we can come back and chit chat about it. So let me know what you think about it. Can we get through it in 2 weeks? Um, the audiobook says that it has 49 chapters. I don't know if those translate to the same thing in written form. So those of you who have Kindle or want to get paperback, let me know. I'll put a link down to the book also in the description bar because one, I think it'll be fascinating to get an insider's perspective on this, an insider that maybe wasn't as heavily indoctrinated. And then two, I really want to support Sherry. She's been through a lot. Girl's definitely going to need some counseling. Girl's going to need some support. And whatever we can do to help her, I think we should do. So let me know what you guys think about what I've said. Watch some of those documentaries and videos that I linked below. If you have your own details, your own theories, your own audacity, opinions, and speculation, I want to hear it. And we'll talk about it when we meet again. Thanks, you guys. See you later.